Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to extend a thank you to the organizers for inviting me to this conference. I don't know how many of you get to go and have a look at some of the countries in the Nordics, but I can tell you it's a bit more boring than coming down here. So when I walked in this morning, I started by seeing somebody sampling beer, which I think is an amazing concept that should be exported to all other conferences in the world. And I was kind of getting a little bit shocked about that, but also in a nice way. And then I saw someone also kind of sampling cigarettes, and I thought, this is what rock and roll is like. I have died and been reborn. So I'm going to speak today a little bit about crafting brand narratives for a digital world. And basically, I'm going to say that we at advertising agencies really suck at understanding how to produce work for the world that exists today. So if anybody wants to leave, they can go now. That's kind of the conclusion of my speech. This is kind of the starting point. There's a quote from a guy called Gareth Kay, who wrote that if you compare the type of work we do in the industry with the work that was made 60 years ago, we make basically the same kind of work. Some things have changed a little bit, but we are trying to catch up with some of the companies we work for, and we're definitely trying to catch up with the way consumers behave today. I know everybody loves to talk about how they've seen the world change and have different kind of examples that illustrate this. So I thought I'd bring an example that tells me that the world has very much changed, that's very local, that's from Denmark. And what you're looking at right now is the most viewed news broadcast at 7 o'clock at night. And they are having a section on the civil war in Syria. And to most people, this looks like a normal news kind of intro. But what happened is that when they did their research, what you're seeing in the background is not a real picture of Syria. Somebody went into Google, they wrote, pictures from Syria, blah, blah, blah. They pulled out a picture, they put it up with the news broadcast. What this picture is really from is actually a sequence from Assassin's Creed. So that's a big fuck up. So normally in a world that we sometimes try to think that we believe we understand, this would have stopped here, right? Obviously, in the world we live in today, this became a catalyst for kind of a viral thing. So it started appearing on blogs outside of Denmark, in the US, internationally, and so on and so forth. Once again, in the world we knew a couple of years ago, this would have stopped at this point. Now we've been introduced to something called internet memes. And obviously, this is quite interesting. So I have just brought two, and I'll try to translate as best I can. Someone wins All England. And the next one, there is a traffic jam in Copenhagen. So the level of creativity amongst our users is fairly high, and sometimes even higher than at agencies. But still, even though I can talk about this, and even though conferences like this love to talk about how things have changed, most of the campaigns and most of the communication that's put into the marketplace is fairly traditionally produced. Because this is how we're hardwired to think the consumers are going to receive our message. Now, I don't know how many of you have an age where you remember sitting in that living room, always, with both of your parents. There was always two kids in the family. One was a boy, one was a girl. There was a couple of years between them. That's kind of how it was. And you sat down on the sofa, and I was pointed directly, just just the right amount of degrees towards the television. And as you watch that program, if you said anything, you just know your dad would say, "Shut the fuck up." Because, you really had to concentrate to understand what was going on, right? You really had to focus. That has significantly changed. And we are still believing that we live, talk, communicate in this kind of world. Another thing that's obviously changed is we are hardwired to start to keep thinking about media in an analog kind of way. I'm going to come back to this point, but obviously, as this conference is all about, that has significantly changed as well. You've probably all seen this slide, what happens in an internet in 60 seconds, sorry, but it gives you an impression about the magnitude of that change and how that has influenced consumers and how they receive messages is what I'm going to use a little bit of time talking about. So two things I think is hugely important and probably the most important thing to remember. We've all been brought up and learned how to work with communication in a world that basically had a scarce media resource. And the reason why we're talking about 30-second ads one-page ads, 50-second radio spots, and so on, is because media was a scarce resource. There weren't that much around and it was fairly expensive to buy it. Now, in the digital world, media is obviously a very abundant kind of resource, and there's a lot of media. On the other hand, in the old days, the black and white picture from before, there was a lot of attention because there were not that much media, and people basically had time to look at your messages even though they might not have been that good. Now there's an attention scarcity. So those two trends are coming together, and that is why we need to, as professional communication people, think about how we can construct different and more complex narratives for consumers that are ready to perceive them. Fuck, that makes me nervous with that camera. I'm gonna stand over here somewhere. All right, sorry. So the audience is evolving, something is happening, and we are left behind. Okay. Steve Johnson wrote an interesting book about it that had the title, Everything Bad is Good for You. And in that book, he basically says that everything we see today as low culture, all of those soap operas, the unintelligent kind of TV, is so much more sophisticated than what we're used to in the past, because the way that people interrelate with each other, the number of characters that get introduced, has made us a lot more sophisticated in the kind of narratives we're able to take in and understand than we were just some years ago. One of the examples he brings forth, and which one of the most complex TV series at the time of the writing of that book, is the TV series Lost. And you might remember this. It was there was more things going on the internet about this, and about who was what, and what was that secret, and nobody really understood what was happening, or I didn't understand anyway. But here is a picture about the number of characters and how those characters interrelated with each other. And most people understood that this was kind of a mainstream TV series that was watched all over the world. Now, 30 or 40 years ago, 20 years ago, you might have a TV sitcom where you might have 3 or 4 or 5 people, a family, interacting with each other, and that was it. The neighbor might pop by once in a while, but that was basically the character setting of this. Now you're looking at something like this for Lost, and you just understand that if consumers are able to understand this when we talk about entertainment, why are we still delivering such poorly crafted and boring and unintelligent and simple commercial messages? Why don't we just try to follow a little bit this, obviously not necessarily constructing the next Lost narrative, but trying to understand that consumers are able to be a bit more sophisticated than what they were in the past. They're also able to work a bit with intertextuality. So normally, if you only saw one of these executions, you would see the Homer Simpson one, and you would have to know the Homeland one to understand the joke that's implied here. But a lot of consumers have such a good reference point at this point that you can cross-reference and work with intertextuality in order to entertain them. If anybody's interested in this, you should have a look at The Simpsons, who are the world-class champions in this sort of gimmicks. Another thing I want to talk to you about before I go into a couple of cases is I want to tell you about a book called Convergence Culture by a guy called Henry Jenkins. And what he basically says is that transmedia storytelling is increasingly becoming a way of constructing a more elaborate and engaging story. And what he basically builds upon is that we can trust not only to make more complex stories, but to spread these stories across a multitude of platforms. And consumers will increasingly be able to find different bits and construct their own narrative as long as we design it in the right way. So using some of that as an inspiration, I thought I would share with you perhaps some of, from my experience, one of the most complicated things that is really out there in terms of constructing complex narratives, and I hope not everybody has seen, but this is John Nageri, who's had a lot of free time on his hand, and he has looked at every Pixar film ever produced. And he's not just looked at them, he's looked really, really careful at them. And his thesis is that every Pixar film is interconnected. So from Cars to Toy Story, everything is interconnected, and there's a red line throughout the whole universe. I unfortunately don't have time to show you the whole film. I would encourage you to look at it afterwards. It's an amazing piece of detective work, I should say, but I'm going to show you like 2 or 3 minutes just so you get an idea about the level of complexity that's in this.
What if I told you that all Pixar movies are connected? That all the characters in those movies actually actually live in the same universe, only in different times. How is that possible? Keep watching and you'll find out. Our story starts with the movie Brave, back in the old days of Scotland. In the movie, Merida discovers some kind of magic which accidentally transforms her mother into a bear. That mysterious magic power comes from a witch in the forest.
Get out!
This will be the first time we see animals act like humans. But who is that witch in the forest? We see her disappearing through doors and we know she has magical powers, but who is she really? Well, actually, she played a big role in one other film on our list, but we'll get to that later. During the centuries that followed Brave, the animals and objects who were experimented on by the witch have slowly evolved, creating a power struggle between humans, animals, and machines. The conflict between humans and animals is depicted across Ratatouille, Finding Nemo, and Up. In Ratatouille, the animals are starting to experiment with their growing intelligence in small environments. In the movie, Remy tries to invade a human-only territory, cooking. He then befriends a group of humans but makes one enemy, Chef Skinner. What happened to Skinner after discovering the intelligent mice that outperformed human beings? It's possible that the word of that discovery has reached the ears of Charles Muntz, the villain in Up, which then led him to develop technology that could harness the thoughts of animals. After Muntz's demise, the dogs are freed, but we don't really know what happened to them. But one thing's for sure, now that people know the potential of animals, they start crossing the line, and the hatred between the two grows. Thus begins the Industrial Revolution hinted at in Up. In the beginning of Up, Carl is forced to sell his house to a corporation in charge of expanding the city. Think about it. What corporation is responsible for pollution and technology overreach? By and large, is the massive corporation that runs pretty much everything in WALL-E. In the history of B&L, an ad in the movie, we're told that B&L has even taken over world governments.
With over 2 million wholly owned subsidiaries, governmental bodies, and healthcare centers, by and large has become...
I get you probably get the point now. Oh, that's not good. There we go. You probably get the point, and I'm not saying that this is where we are today, and we should be constructing something of this complexity. My point is that this is the world that we're moving into, and at some point we'll see entertainment shift more and more into this. For those of you who watch Game of Thrones, that's also a very, very complicated narrative with lots of ins and outs, characters doing different things, especially dying, new characters getting introduced, and so on and so forth. So what we tried to do 3 years ago is we tried to say, okay, can we construct something from, and this is 3.5 years old, so it's a little bit shitty today, but there's the first thing where we thought, can we do something that's more complex? Can we try to have more of people's attention? Can we try to get people more engaged with our brand than what we would normally do? And this is for a jeans label for girls between the age of 15 and 25. And I'm just going to show you the case study now.
For the launch of the Only Jeans 2012 collection, we wanted to create a whole new way for our teenage girl audience to interact with the brand. The result was The Liberation, an online interactive film experience. It is a fashion catalogue, a movie, a game, a music video, and the world's first on-demand video retail environment. This is how it worked. The entire experience was built around a story of rebellion. 3 girls roll into a sleepy town looking for trouble. As you watch the film, you can start interacting with it. With a simple click at any time, the film freezes on a preloaded high-res still and then turns into an interactive catalogue. Every item of clothing has been tracked, and from here you can like, browse, pin, tweet, and buy. As you carry on watching, you are invited to interact with the action of the film, moving the story forward. You can steal a pair of jeans. And if you're lucky, the experience crosses over into a reality and the jeans are sent to your home free. You get to sneak a peek at a hot guy getting undressed in the woods. Another treat is the music. The soundtrack was made dynamic, enabling it to sing and flow seamlessly throughout the entire interactive experience.
Feelings too.
You can download the soundtrack Let Go by Swedish breakthrough artist Loon as you watch her perform in the final scenes of the movie. Finally, you get to help the girls hightail it out of town in their car. end, your personal experience is summed up in a bespoke catalogue, so you can revisit the clothes you looked at, shop, share, download music and wallpapers. We launched with a 30-second teaser and on-set bloggers. A thorough PR campaign kept us front page on fashion blogs across Europe. And within 2 weeks, we had over 280,000 visits and a 442% increase on interaction with Only.com.
Yeah, unfortunately, we always have to have these kind of things at the end. One of the points I want to make here is that approximately 1.5 million consumers have chosen to go into this project and spend just a little over 4 minutes with the brand, interacting and playing with it. The project was more than financed by the amount of people who chose to buy directly in the film. And there was still a lot of people going to the website and making those buys, but just establishing an additional and different retail channel, a place where the brand had never sold their clothes before, in the middle of a piece of film. So I think that's quite interesting. It's 4 years old, so obviously a lot of things have happened since then. I think we should be doing more of this. I think we should be thinking more about this, and I think we should have the courage to trust that the consumers, if we produce this in a nice, interesting way, will want to engage with it. I want to share one more example for you. This has been made, it's launched 2 months ago, so it's still relatively new. It's for a barbecue brand called Weber. They make like round barbecues. Some of you might know them. And I think I'm just going to play the case video and going to talk about it afterwards. Oh, sorry about that. And there we go.
We all love to barbecue. And when you love to barbecue, there's one thing you want. More barbecue. For the 2015 barbecue season, Weber decided to give their grill enthusiasts more barbecue stuff than you can shake your spatula at. In this immersive digital experience, we invite our grillers on a journey through barbecue cultures across the world to discover, to learn, to be inspired. Through cinematic and interactive content using film, animations, split screens and cinemagraphs, we join barbecues we might never have had the chance to experience. We learn everything from how to choose the right piece of meat, to the importance of timing, keeping your knives razor sharp, and smoking a Norwegian salmon. The multitude of barbecue content makes this a rich and delicious journey. Every piece of content, whether interactive tools, tutorial videos, or inspirational recipes, had to be useful and shareable, with each deep dive having a specific mission to entertain, educate, and showcase Weber's product range. The campaign site was backed by a huge social media presence, as every single piece of content was made shareable across Facebook and Twitter. Additional bite-sized content was also seeded to drive traffic towards both the laptop and the specifically tailored mobile experience. Whether you love barbecues for the gadgets, for the food, for the passion, for the fire, or for the friends, this hybrid digital experience lets you dive in and immerse yourself completely in the amazing thing that is barbecue.
So I think this basically tells you where we are today, and I hope we'll be able to go even further in this direction in the future. I want to close on a specific note. I think that there is, at every conference I attend, and especially in client meetings and the dialogue we have, there is a lot of talk about how much things should change, how much things might have changed. I do think that going forward, we should focus on action, because it do speak louder than words, and we need to see a lot more of these kind of projects. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great conference. And if anybody wants to hit me up on email, this is my email's here. Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much. That was great.